All set.
All right. Welcome, everyone. This is the February 25th, 2025 regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission here in New Canaan. We have a number of items on the agenda here, but I would like to, for anyone in the audience or anyone on Zoom, just to let you know that the fifth item on the agenda, which is Brookwood Lane, 82 Brookwood Lane, the applicant has pulled the application for tonight, so we will not be hearing that application. That will be next month.
Which is March 25th.
March 25th?
Yep.
March 25th. So just to give everyone a heads up in case you're waiting for it, it's not happening tonight. So let's take attendance. Dan Radman here, Krista Nielsen.
Here.
John Kriz.
Here.
Chris Herring is not here. John Engel.
Here.
Paul Knag.
Here.
Alan Swerdlow.
Here.
Tom Benton is not here. He'll be out. Eric Knowles.
Here.
And Christina Larson.
Here.
Megan Mensching.
Here.
And Bill Pratt.
Here.
Great. So we need two of the alternates for Chris and for Tom. So we'll be seating Christina and Megan for those two open seats tonight. All right, first item on the agenda. We're in the public hearing session here. First item is discussion and consideration of the request of VIM Incorporated, care of Frank Vuoso, owner, to amend the zoning regulations dated June 16th, 2007, amended December 6th, 2024, to amend section 4.4 business A zone to permit pet grooming facility via special permit under certain circumstances. Who do we have here from, come up to the table, make sure your microphone is turned on, press the button until you get a green light. Let us know your name and association with the project.
Okay. Frank Veloso, VMI Incorporated, 272 Elm Street owner. This is Lou DeCunto, who is DBI Development, who's a contract. Good evening. Thank you for having us here. And thank you for the opportunity to present our text amendment, our proposed text amendment. We propose an amendment to Business A Zone, section 4.4, to permit pet grooming facilities under specific conditions. This amendment provides clear guidelines and ensures businesses operate in compliance with town zoning regulations. Currently, the Business A Zone does not provide explicit guidance on pet grooming facilities. So we propose adding the following language to Business A Zone 4.4. Pet grooming facilities shall be permitted on lots with a minimum area of 20,000 square feet. Such facilities must operate as an accessory use to the primary business on the premises and shall be located in a separate designated room within the building. The overnight boarding of animals is strictly prohibited. This regulation introduces proper restrictions, including lot size, free use, and no overnight stays to protect the surrounding community. And I believe approving this amendment provides clarity, ensures compliance, and prevents future conflicts. So thank you for your time and welcome any feedback or questions.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
I'll chime in. So number one, thank you for coming back with this. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
I know it's a bear to go through the process, but this is the right process to do it. So I appreciate that. As we talked about when you came forth with the application for the pet store, it's actually not overnight. I mean, overnight boarding would not be ideal. I mean,
No,
I'm not in favor of it, but the other issue was more having the dogs there for more than 4 hours requires an indoor or outdoor exercise area.
Mhm.
Would you, so to me, I would change that last sentence. Instead of saying the overnight boarding of animals is strictly prohibited, I would just say grooming facilities shall not have an indoor or outdoor dog exercise area, which basically means under Department of Agriculture code, you won't be able to have the dogs there more than 4 hours.
correct.
But does that matter to you if we
No.
change the language
No.
like that? Because I think it's less an overnight boarding issue and more of a outdoor exercise area issue.
Right. Sure,
So I would just make that clarification if that's okay with you.
that's fine. We could do that.
Commissioners, anything further? So you're the landlord for the property, correct?
Correct. I'm the owner.
The owner. And the business that's coming in, is that your business or that's someone
I'm
else?
gonna be a tenant.
It's gonna be a tenant?
Yeah.
Okay.
They'll go through approvals and stuff. I'm gonna actually help them a bit.
Okay. I guess that's it, guys. Signage, you know that signage will have to be a separate permit.
Absolutely.
And then, again, to just revisit the original application that you put together, there's no change to the exterior of the building, parking, or any of the site
Just the
conditions?
rear building, just the rear drive-through enclosure.
Drive-through enclosure.
Right.
So just to be
Nothing.
clear, this application is not for the use at this specific property. It's just for the text amendment to business A, just to be clear.
So will they be coming back to us?
They will have to.
They will have to.
As a change of use again?
No, so you have approval right now to have the retail pet store.
Sure.
It's not a change of use, it's just to add the.
Added on, okay.
Yeah. Because it's now a special permit and you
I
have
see.
site plan approval,
Okay.
so you still need approval.
Fair enough. And this is regular, are we taking public comment on this one?
Yes, because it's a text amendment, you have to take
We
public
do, right.
comment.
Anything further, commissioners?
This is Commissioner Chris. Commissioner Nielsen, could I get the specific language you would like to, you have proposed? So we know what you're, we vote on or talk about.
So I would strike the language, the last sentence that says the overnight boarding of animals is strictly prohibited, and I would replace it with something like grooming facilities shall not have an indoor or outdoor dog exercise area.
Shall not have. Okay, so if you have a dog up to 4 hours, you're required by the agriculture department to have that
Correct,
3 foot by 8 foot space that's covered.
correct.
So why wouldn't, I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, my personal opinion is we don't want dogs outdoors. I mean, I guess I could.
So I
get rid
could
of
do it indoors. I have a very large facility.
Okay, so if I took out, so let me try again.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Grooming facilities shall
please.
not have an outdoor dog exercise area.
Should we say dog or animal? Does it matter?
Pet,
I don't know.
Pet.
Pet,
outdoor pet exercise.
more.
Yeah, that's
more,
fine.
more all encompassing.
No outdoor. No outdoor.
It's fine, pet exercise.
Probably
area.
mostly dogs, but
I mean,
cover
people might
all
want to
bases.
exercise their rabbits.
The
you never
occasional-
know.
the
Let's cover
occasional
all bases.
emu.
Let's
cats
cover all
running
bases. Cover the bases. So once more with feeling, sorry.
Grooming facilities shall not have an outdoor pet exercise area as a replacement to the overnight boarding of animals is strictly prohibited.
Okay.
Or wouldn't.
Thank you,
still-
Commissioner.
Wouldn't you still want to put in, overnight boarding?
So that's a whole nother level of licensing. I mean, I guess we could have that, I guess, if you want, but again,
It's
then
not
you,
necessary, you don't like.
well, then you're saying you're a kennel if you're doing overnight boarding. And again, that's a whole nother level of licensing beyond a
Well,
grooming.
that's not what we're, okay.
Right.
Okay,
I'm okay. Thank you.
great. Does anyone in the public want to comment on this application? Anyone in Zoom world want to comment on this application? Okay. This application is closed. Shall we wait to the end for the vote or?
Yep.
vote?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Item number 2, discussion and consideration of the request of David Rucci, Lambert Tui Rucci LLC, authorized agent for 14 Richmond Hill Road, LLC, owners to amend the zoning regulation dated June 17, 2007, amended December 6, 2024, to amend section 5.4.c to allow the Planning and Zoning Commission to reduce certain requirements for legally non-conforming lots in order to facilitate the redevelopment of these lots and housing in the apartment zone. Everyone, I will be recusing myself for this one, so get you steer.
All right. All right, Mr. Rucci, I'll let you.
Sure. Good evening. David Rucci. I'm here with Ed Zilas, who's one of the developers of the property. Joe Bavona also is online with Zoom. And we actually went out and Town Planner Steve Kleppin's also on Zoom as well for us. So the way we looked at this initially is we have two properties in the apartment zone, 14 and 20 Richmond Hill Road. And I know you guys are used to having, you know, the text change applications, and then behind it, you'll have the actual application itself. Well, it's a little bit harder for us to do that in this particular case. So what we wanted to do was to go out and kind of look at the zone overall. So it's not just looking at a site-specific property, it's really looking at the apartment zone itself and the density requirements for some of these applications, for some of these properties. So we thought that it would be a good idea to get it. We've talked to Sarah, she's been great. The town planner was sort of helping us through looking at text changes, looking at putting two families in, looking at doing different multifamily units. But unfortunately in this zone, most of the multifamily units are all non-conforming. I mean, they are all above density. Most of them are over the setback regulations. The zone in and of itself sort of started somewhere around 1955. And as the zoning regulations changed over the past 4 or 5 text changes, this apartment zone, which was sort of originally for more denser more denser units and families in housing, has now, it's pretty hard to do anything as far as density goes in this particular zone. So what we thought would be a good idea to get another town planner, because, you know, once we file an application, you can't really talk to the town planner that much about it. So we engaged Steve Kleppin to sort of help us look at this zone overall, what he thought about the zone and, you know, what he thought was reasonable as far as density, et cetera. So as you look at the apartment zone here, it's all the orange. So you can see that it kind of goes up around, it stops, you know, Park Street's in there, Mead, Maple, you have the Heritage Hill Apartments, and then you have the apartments at the end of Elm Street as well. And there's a little grouping along Seminary Street for the apartment zone itself. These particular two properties are sort of right at the border of Richmond Hill and where the park comes in. If you can just go to the next one. And what we found with these is that the homes in and of itself, the way that this is what the zone looks like today. So you need a minimum zone area, about 15,000 square feet, with setbacks. The big one is really this density. It goes from 1 unit to 5,000 square feet for density, and you have a max building coverage of 25%. Now, those particular things within this zone are not really conducive to if you want more density in the zone closer to town, just from an overall planning perspective. So when these were built, I think it was like 1 to 1,500 for the maximum density in the zone, and you only were required to have 7,500 square feet, and you were allowed to have, I think, 8 feet rear, 15 feet sides, or maybe 15 feet front and sides. If you go to the next, I think I have it on the next. Oh, so yeah, so this was the 1955 when these particular properties were put up, and you can see that, you know, you had a front yard of 15 feet. You had 75 feet of frontage in the front, 7,500 per apartment house, and then you had a density of basically 1,500 per unit. So in these particular properties on 14 and 20, we have about 8 units right now. There's 4 in the rear lot and there's 4 in the front lot. So they're beyond the density regulation in and of itself today. If you can just go to the next one. And here's sort of just to give you an idea of what we're looking at. So here's, many of you know this property. You know, it's 20 Richmond Hill. We'll just go through these kind of quickly. This is they share an access way that goes to a rear lot in the back. That's just the access way as it continues to go back to there. This is when you hit the rear lot in the back, 14 Richmondville. There's a home behind there, which has 4 units in it as well. This is the side of 20 on the front. It's about 15 feet from the side, this one right now, maybe 18 feet from the side. This is just, this is a single family resident right next door. So the zone in and of itself is not all multifamilies. It's definitely littered with some single families as well. And this one next door is a single family. This is the rear of the property of 14, and you can see that it backs up to the Park Slope condominiums. So there's condominiums in the back. There's about 14 of those. And that's just another picture of the condos as they move back. Another one there. And this is looking out towards Richmond Hill from the rear property, essentially. So that you can kind of give you an idea of how far back this lot goes. So we looked at two different kind of ways to look at this text change. The first one had to do more with bringing, basically, if you reduce the density, meaning you reduce from 5 units, which one of them they are today, and you go something different, then you're able to sort of use the inclusionary zoning because you're taking stuff away from zoning. It meets more with the rationale of the POCD, where you're trying to, support in-house homing, more density closer to town. And when we brought this basically through town planner Kleppen, Steve Kleppen was like, listen, I think you should do something a little more simpler. So this alternate text proposal that I have up, which is the second one down, is I think probably more conducive to what is better for an overall zone, the apartment zone, versus what we had it kind of initially in the top. But really what we're trying to deal with now is non-conforming properties in this zone. That's really what we're trying to get away from and what we're trying to make more conforming. So this, you have it all in front of you. It's just basically saying that a non-conforming multifamily dwelling in the apartment zone, so long as it was built in conformance at the time that it was built, can be rebuilt to the same or lesser density. They can utilize the setbacks effective as of the date of their construction was, and you can increase the allowable building coverage up to 35% on the property, provided that you do the following. It's consistent with development pattern of the property. Proposed structures are in harmony with the rest of the property. High quality design, construction materials. And then one of the things that the town planner Kleppen mentioned is that, if you're going to be increasing footprint, you really should give something back. So, make sure that you keep all the runoff on site, something that's not going to be adding more to the different stormwater drains, et cetera, on the property. So that's sort of we're looking to this board tonight, not for a decision. We're kind of really looking for your thoughts, your comments, your general ideas. We know obviously there's a subcommittee meeting, and I know you're going to be looking at all the regulations. And I know that I was appreciative of the town planner in this case, basically saying, listen, we know we're going to look at this apartment zone, but for the time being, this is a way to deal with non-conforming properties in the zone from a development perspective. If you'll just go to the next one for me. So obviously one of the things that we wanted to look at is the plan of conservation development and how it fits into the plan of conservation development. And we're talking about supporting development patterns in the community. We're talking about the fact that, by allowing this, you're not really increasing the density at all. You're basically building the same to a certain extent. It's consistent with that strategy also of having more density within closer to town. Just the next one. They got to be, by the way, this is all special permits. So if the commission adopts this text change, you would still always come back to this commission from a special permit perspective, and they would be looking at things, like high quality building, whether or not the renderings are appropriate to the neighborhood, whether the scale is appropriate to the neighborhood. If you just move on for that, please. In this particular case, we're going from essentially 4 units on the property to 3 units on the property, reducing impacts to town. This is something else that one of the strategies of the POC talks about, reducing water, keeping stormwater on the property, things that will be beneficial to development, denser development in town. And then obviously it's increasing housing opportunities. It's like right around the corner from the train station itself. This is, if you go to the next one, so this is a potential rendering. We're not obviously married to any of these things because this is just to show sort of how it would look on the site or a potential way it would look on the site. We've already gotten comments from other people that, you know, maybe we should be looking at something more that with the front, you know, like the front porch so that the streetscape itself doesn't show the side of the building, right? So this is just something to show that how it may look, meeting the height requirements, going from 4 to 3 units. But obviously that would be something that we would come back to this commission with, you know, plans as to how they wanted to look at it, because we're talking about also the commission being involved in the design based on the fact that it's got to fit within the landscape and the properties itself on Richmond Hill. So we envision that anything in the apartment zone that's dealing with non-conforming structures, that this commission, we would have sort of a give and take as to what kind of materials we're going to be using, whether or not the density is appropriate for the zone, whether or not it's going to have any sort of impact in the zone. Another reason why we didn't attach sort of an application to this particular project. So I know that's a lot to take in, and it's not easy to just all of a sudden be like, oh, I know the apartment zone off the top of my head. But we're just kind of looking really from your perspective, from like density, right? We have these non-conforming lots, we have these non-conforming structures. They're higher in density in general. It's really hard to really do anything as of right on these properties based on the regulations in the apartment zone itself, because over the years, what's happened is you've increased the density requirements on the property, you've increased the setbacks on the property, and yet all these properties are still pretty small in the zone. You know, they're all like 7,500, 10,000, 12,000 square feet of lot area property. We're going through sort of an analysis as well to show some of the other properties in the zone. But that's sort of our, you know, our pitch for tonight as to, you know, to get you all start thinking about it and what questions you may have in overall, you know, planning.
Commissioners?
Question, this is
ahead,
Commissioner
Mr.
Chris.
Chris.
What I'm hearing basically is that a structure in the multifamily zone that is now non-conforming essentially gets grandfathered if it were to be raised and you want to put up a new building. Is that, in a nutshell, is that sort of what I'm hearing?
Well, we couldn't do a new building today under the regulations.
Understood.
Yeah.
You would be able to do it here if you use the current.
With the text change, we would be able to do something that would be of the same density. So there shouldn't be anything more to the site to a certain extent. And it does, but you can't comply with the regs today. That's the problem. You can't comply with the setbacks very well, and you can't comply with the coverage very well based on these smaller lots. That's the issue that we've been running into with at least these particular 2 lots and what we see in the zone itself. So you'll see things like the Park Slope development. You'll see there's some condos down the streets, things that were done that are over density now, but they were done prior to when the densities moved up. I think they moved up 3 times since 55, meaning they went from a density of 1 to 1,500, which is what we have on these properties. I think then they went to 2,500, 3,500,
Yeah.
and now they're at 5,000. So many of them are sort of around 3,500, it seems like. That's what it sort of seems like the density is on it. But we're just looking at it from an overall apartment zone planning on this particular text change. And I definitely think it's something also that the subcommittee can look at as well, and whether they tweak this today or whether they tweak it, you know, whatever year it's going to take you guys. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe not a year, but I remember sitting through like 2 years of it last time. So, you know, but we think, and we can't really wait on some of these properties. So that's why we're bringing it today.
Just further on this, just to make sure I understand it. So let's say the density is 5,000, or let's say 6,000, just to pick a number. And this is higher than the density currently allowed. So you could raise that building and build a new building with 6,000 density, not necessarily in the same footprint, but would be 6,000 density.
Well, you
You're
can only
grandfathered
build
with
to
the
what you
density.
have today. So I can't build anything more than I have today under the regs.
Start with 6,
Yeah, I can't go higher than that. I
right,
can only go lower
right.
than that. So I can build to the same density that I have today or lower. That would be the,
So let's say there are 5 units on the lot today, but existing zoning would only allow 2. It's basically saying that you could build up to 5 units again, or you could do 4, or you could do 3. It's just more than 2, less than 5.
Essentially like a
That's-
grandfathering, for example, if you have a building that's non-conforming and the rules change, you can still keep the building, obviously, but,
yeah, and one of the things that we ran into when we
Okay.
looked at these properties was, you're allowed to use in this zone, the B resident regs for 2-family buildings. So we all know that, right? How that works. And even that's a real challenge for these lots. So even though we had this 4 unit, we still would have had to come in, and it wasn't clear whether we could actually get a special permit for a 2-family unit, even though we were going from 4 to 2. And I know that at the last subcommittee meeting, there was some concern over detached units, right? And how those would, those are in, right now in this zone, you can do detached units. So this would actually allow a developer, they wouldn't want to do a detached unit, right? Because they could get that 3rd unit when, instead of going down to 2 units. So instead of having these 9,000, I think one of them's, I think 13,000, one of these is, and the other one is 9,500. You would be able to detach in that zone because you're grandfathered in from the B residence. But I know that there's concern as to like how those look. And so even on a smaller zone, that may not be appropriate. So, but this would give a developer a much easier redevelopment tool to use rather than trying to force something like that. And because it also comes down, honestly, to finances, right? And that's why I think a lot of people do these detached units, because you can sell them for more, or you can rent them for more. So I think that that's kind of a part of the equation. We're never going to do anything about the financial part. I mean, obviously, all these properties are expensive, and these developers, to redevelop them, are going to have to, find a way to make those numbers work. I know that's not a Planning and Zoning Commission issue, but it's obviously, something you have to think about globally when you're looking at them, I think.
So
Thank you.
what's a conforming development? Like, say you knock down the buildings and you could only build a conforming development. What's the,
You can go back.
and you
to
bulk
that
it out,
first.
what's the biggest you could build?
The biggest you can build, you have to build 1 to 5,000.
Okay. So
Right.
on these 2 sites specifically, which are around what, 10,000?
One's 9,500, so you could get one on
You
that.
get, 2 units and one
Maybe
building?
only one, because you're under the,
Because you're under, so you get
Yeah.
a single family home.
right, so you'd be going from roughly, a 4-unit development to a single family house.
Right.
And I just think that, the way that whole zone is supposed, was originally put together from the apartment zone perspective, was for more density, not for less density. Like, being closer to town, you would want more units, at least from a
Right.
POCD perspective.
No, understood. But I mean, I guess these 2 lots in their size, are they outliers in the apartment zone, or is this kind of, or are you finding everything's around
I think
10,000 square feet?
I mean, I'm definitely going to provide that evidence as well to you, because we started doing that analysis. It's not so easy from the assessor's cards to figure it out, but they're not outliers. I mean, most of them are small.
I mean, I understand the application. I understand kind of what you're going for. I just, it's small lots, and, to give some of the bulk waivers in here. And you can correct me, which seem maybe tailored for this site specifically, like 35% lot coverage of the 15-foot, or the existing setbacks, 15-foot setbacks. If you could provide analysis that shows everything.
Seems like a lot to you.
Right, because it seems like it's, you have 2 sites that are kind of uniquely squarely fit for some sort of relief. And
Yeah.
that's,
I mean,
think I've said
most-
this at past hearings, that I understand text amendments, but I don't generally support them for narrow, single locations that, I have a green wall on a south side of the street, and therefore I get this relief, provided I get a special permit.
Yeah, and honestly, that's why we came in without the applications attached to it. We are looking at it globally at the apartment zone, which is why we went out and did find somebody who can help us with that type of an analysis. But most of these lots, by the way, are already over coverage. I mean, I'm sorry, not already over setbacks. So it's not gonna be like, oh my God, I can't believe that's so close now. Like one of the lots in the front, this is an old map, but I can tell you the front lot, I think is 8 feet from the side yard. And I think 20 from, actually I wrote it where I make up stuff. So 14, the rear lot it's got sides of 16 already. And then it's got a rear of 25. And then 20, which is in the front, that has a side of 21 and a side of 8. And then it's got an accessory building like on the back that's only 10 feet from the back lot. So it's not like you're all of a sudden like, oh my God, this thing is so close to me right now, because they're already sort of like that. They're already non-conforming in the zone. And to your point, yeah, so I can't really look at every single, I don't have surveys for every property as to where they are, but I can certainly tell you that's 8,000 square feet, that's 12,000, that's what these lots are.
Yeah.
And they're multifamily or they're not multifamily.
Are you thinking that this would be also suitable for, for permanent change, if we were the committee, if you were on the committee, considering what the new regulations should say and how the current regulations should be changed, would this represent your recommendation as to how they should be changed?
Well, I think it's really hard because they're all non-conforming, like the apartment zones, a lot of non-conforming lots. So you can either have a regulation like this that gives them sort of the balance that they need, or you just change the regulation itself and say, okay, it doesn't matter whether you're non-conforming or not non-conforming. Every lot is 7,500 square feet. And you got 15-foot setbacks. You can do density of one, like if you look back at the 1955 regs, like I don't know if that's the reg you would use, but you could just sort of set it up that way and not worry about non-conforming lots. And I think a lot of really you can just do single. I mean, in the end, when you're looking at you do single family.
Yeah.
So if you're going to buy a property like these two, now maybe that's what we want, but that's not necessarily something that's POCD, close to town. We want more density. We want more units, right? So that's sort of, I think, the rub to the whole thing.
Ms. Carey, look like you have
Yeah,
a comment,
just
please.
going back to the coverage and setback comments that you all were just discussing, I will just note that the 35% building coverage is permitted through the inclusionary zoning. So it's not, necessarily an arbitrary number. It is something that the commission in the past has said, we are in situations comfortable with the 35%. So there are other places in this zone already where if they utilize inclusionary zoning, they could have 35% building coverage. And then I'll also just add with potentially relaxing the setbacks up until, I want to say the 80s, it was 75 foot width in the apartment zone for lots. So, and then it got changed to 100. And then they also increased the setbacks from, I think it was 15 feet on each side to 25 on each side. So this would again just be providing additional relief for lots that existed before these regulation changes, 34
I have
years
a
ago.
question from Ms. Carey, if she could remind me and the rest of the commission on some specific definitional issues such as foot area ratio versus density versus coverage. So we know exactly what some of these terms mean within this context.
So we do not have floor area ratio
We're not gonna talk about-
requirements
Okay,
for anything in residential zones, only in business zones. So we're just gonna not discuss floor area ratio. We just have building coverage, which is what percentage of the lot can be covered in, building footprint. I think the apartment zone also has a landscaped area requirement, which is that's the only zone in New Canaan that has that requirement. It's 25%. And then you said density, which is units per acre. So,
regardless of size of unit, so it's a dwelling unit.
correct. I think apartment zone actually has a minimum.
I think it's 750, isn't it?
No, that's retail. Apartment zone
retail,
has a
sorry.
minimum apartment size, which is 1,500 square feet, which is a, old zoning practice and kind of frowned upon these days. You usually don't want a minimum apartment size, but that's what we have.
That's what we have now.
Yeah.
So the 1,500 would apply, at least at the beginning, if we were to.
Yeah,
approve
it
this.
would apply. They would have to provide
Okay.
units that are at least
Just want to be sure
1,500.
understand what we're talking about here.
But the 35% coverage, we say that elsewhere in the context of inclusionary housing, right?
Correct, for the zone.
So, I mean, another suggestion to your, you know, give, right, in D is, you know, the potential for an affordable unit for a greater slew of bulk waivers would be something that I would support.
I'm
I
sorry.
would just say they wouldn't, sorry, I would just say they wouldn't need to include that in a text amendment because if they're providing an affordable unit, they automatically get access to those waivers, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think town planner just reminded me that that was one of the reasons that I didn't bring up, that we found that we used the 35% rule because it was something that was actually allowable in the zone. And I think the first text change that I put up, that's what I was thinking about when I put it through there. But then after I was talking to town planner Kleppen about it, it didn't make any sense from just to use inclusionary zoning, just make it non-conforming, you know, make it as simple as possible, which made more sense. But that's how we came up with the 35%. And also, you know, it kind of makes sense because you're talking about density. You are talking about multiple units, not necessarily more than 4, but you're still having more than 2 essentially in the zone. And I think that's why we came up with 35%. But then we put parameters on it that, you know, this board's got to be involved in the fact that, you know, what this thing's going to look like, how it's going to fit onto the property. All the site drainage has to sit on the property. You know, there had to be things that, and you may come back and be like, you know what, 35 is too much, 32 is something that we might be able to support or what have you. But that's why we came up with the 35%.
One further questions for Ms. Carey in particular. I know under the new state law on middle housing and being able to build some things that are right, and you get some hue points for them. And so it's what, 4 units is I guess the figure. I'm wondering, let's say you have a building which has 5 units and you're sort of grandfathered in with 5. You want to tear that down and put up something brand new and nicer, let's say. Does that
I don't think this would
qualify for
apply
this?
because it would have to be as of right. and
Yeah,
you're
you can't
requiring
require a special permit.
So.
Okay, this wouldn't fall under that.
No,
No.
we don't have anything at this time.
Okay, just
that would be
wondering,
As of right, so.
somehow this qualified. So,
No.
okay, you've answered the question.
So, Mr. Rucci, here are my comments. To your point, I do think that the apartment zone is the appropriate place in this town for more density, and it is, to your point, been watered down over time, such that, you know, 8 units per acre in most places is not considered dense. So I don't really have any issue with what you're attempting to do here. In fact, I didn't know that you wouldn't have been able to do this without a text change. I thought you could. I do question the increase in coverage to 35%. Currently, I believe it's 25% in the apartment zone. It looks like from the 1955 zoning regulations, it was 25% then for coverage. Oh, that's maximum building area. Is that the same thing as coverage?
I believe so.
I believe so.
Yeah. So basically what I hear you saying is we want to keep the same density, but we want to go bigger unit sizes,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
And given that these are small lots, I don't know that I'm totally sold on that idea. I'm fine with keeping the density. I just don't understand. I'm not convinced that we need to go bigger unit sizes. I know that's what the market wants.
Right.
I don't know if that's what the town needs. So I think you would have to make a case there, at least for me, that that's necessary. And the last thing I'll say is your last point on there about the drainage will be contained on site. Isn't that already required by the town's drainage policy?
The new policy,
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, just 2 comments, because this is the first time I'm seeing the updated regulation amendment as well, so just 2 points. Any special permit use in the apartment zone already has to have a design review under the village district guidelines, so that is kind of a redundant regulation, it's already required. And then the drainage policy is that any additional impervious area has to be contained on site, so you have to mimic existing conditions. So this would go above and beyond, and just, I assume, like, I would interpret that to mean all impervious area has to be contained on site, which, I mean, isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that's quite a jump, and I don't know if that's, you know, a burden to multifamily. I think, you know, the current drainage policy is very robust already. So, you know, you could do that, but I don't know if it's necessary.
I was thinking about it. I mean, let's say you had you have a driveway somewhere, some of it's gonna run to the street and into the storm sewers. I'm not sure technically how you would do it, frankly, on any site. Anyway, I get that. I would concur with Commissioner Nielsen, is that what tends to be sensitive with people is sort of size and loom issues. And so having that type of coverage of up to 35%, sort of maybe moving towards that sensitive Rubicon. I want to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, the heights don't go up. I mean, the height would still remain the same in the zone. Not under my first one we put up, so, because you could actually change that one instead of so that's not something that we would end up doing. You know, I think why can't you just build it to 25%, right? I mean, I think that's the problem that we're really running into, because these units would be way too small if you were going to go from, a 5-unit to a 3-unit, or a 4-unit to a 3-unit. It would be really small units. And once again, that's not really something that's a good redevelopment size. It's not going to change too much. I mean, I understand your point. We've talked about this amongst our group. So this is not something that we didn't expect to come up per se, but.
But I mean, are the current units tenable? I mean, someone lives in them now, so they must be small now.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I mean, I don't know, Ed.
They're very small. I mean, the 14 Richmond Hill in the back, that current owner was a boat activist and created one apartment as like a living boat. So he would have like little stairs that went up into like a bunk. So it was like almost like he was living on a boat. So it was like a 500 square foot apartment that he just because that's something he enjoyed. So like we can't really reduce that to the new buyers. So our goal really is not even to do the 5 units back there. Our goal is to reduce it to 3 units and just make them suitable for today's living standards of what people are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, and in order to even do the 3 units, that's the reason we're asking for that additional coverage area, is because at 25, it's almost, even 3 units is difficult to have, like even 2-car garage. Forget it. We reduced the 2-car garage and only are doing 1-car garage in order to have a little more square footage for those units.
Mhm.
So as far as keeping it 25, it's still not really feasible, because it just doesn't make sense unless they're like 800-900 square foot apartment units, and who's buying that?
Right. So I mean, I'm speaking from their perspective. I also sit on the town's affordable housing committee, and I don't know this, but I suspect that the units that are there now probably would be considered naturally occurring affordable housing, meaning that because of their size, because of their age, the income that they generate is probably below or near 80% of state median income for a family of 4. And so every time we tear these types of units down and rebuild them into something bigger, you're creating something more expensive, A, because it's new, and B, because it's bigger. And so we're slowly over time reducing the ability for people of all incomes to live in this town. And I understand that, again, the market wants something different than perhaps what the Affordable Housing Committee wants, but that's where I'm coming from in terms of, do we really need to go to bigger units, or is there a need to be served with some smaller units in town?
Yeah, I think we would all want that. I just don't, I think that's already gone. Like, I mean, in a weird way, like none of these houses that are on these smaller lots that need redevelopment. I mean,
Mhm.
they're not in, the best of shape anymore. They don't have, new appliances in it. They don't have good stormwater drainage. They're not great units. So, I mean, the answer could be, we just go in with affordable housing application here and try to build X number of units in this particular site, That's not what this developer wants to do. Maybe that's what you do, I don't know, but you're still paying a large cost for the underlying lots themselves. So, I mean, the way that we looked at these was that we're not really going to be doing much more than what's already there from a development perspective based on where our setbacks are. But if we were trying to actually build a like a legitimate like living room, just a kitchen next to it and a little den or whatever it happens to be, you just need a little bit more area to do that for the three. I understand the concern with what you're talking about. But I mean, in this particular, I think in this Richmond Hill area itself, most of them have been redeveloped into single family homes. You know, that's what people are doing in that area. I mean, I lived across the street, and they basically become single families for the most part. I don't remember if they always were, so I'm not going to say that they were.
And detached too. There's a lot of detached units in Richmond Hill, I believe.
There's some detached, but you know, this particular site itself, and like I said, I'm not trying to be site specific in general with the apartment zone. I mean, I'm really not. But this particular site does really scream out that you have to do something different, I think, from a coverage perspective. And maybe that number is not 35%. Maybe there's a different give back to the town. That's why we were talking about the site. And maybe I overshot that with that particular provision. I'll have to look into exactly what that means as far as, you know, what's the benefit to the town? Because that's what we were trying to do for the additional coverage, was give a benefit to the town. And then what's really the cost to the client? So that'll be something that I'm going to look into before we come back to this commission itself.
I think Mr. Kleppen has his hand raised.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to hear from Mr. Kleppen.
Go ahead, Mr. Clappin.
Thank you. And I won't be long. Just two things. One, building coverage is A, used to control mass, and B, is really meant also to deal with the amount of land you occupy with structures. So that's the nexus to the runoff. So I agree that, you know, your standard is, you know, not to increase the rate of what's running off today, but by containing all the water, stormwater on site, that allows the, you know, it lessens the burden on the town's infrastructure by doing that. So that's kind of why if you're giving something, but you're always getting something back, which is also the increased coverage. You're still, at the end of the day, 65% of the site is not building. You could also look at whether the driveway counts towards that or not, and think about it that way. I think what you're going to find on a different topic, looking at the apartment zone, is my guess is you see very little redevelopment in the apartment zone, just based on what I've looked at so far. There are many condo complexes there. So to, you know, even if you increase the density on that, it's going to be very difficult to redevelop those sites because you have individual ownership of those condominiums. Many of the units that are in the developments that are over the density now, and I'm not really talking about the smaller, like quarter acre, 1/10 of an acre sites that you have like along Richmond, along Seminary Street, because those really, you know, they're in the zone, but they're not really what the, you know, the target property is for the zone. So the you know, 1/2 acre sites and larger, the ones that are over density now are definitely smaller units. And then the ones that are either at the density or slightly below the density, you're getting much larger units than what the, you know, our client's proposing here. There's some on Mead Street, for example, they're really nice units, but they're really large. So I think the likelihood of significant redevelopment in the apartment zone, unless you at least double the allowed density, is pretty unlikely. I think, you know, my 2 cents would be looking at maybe what's in the multifamily zone, or focusing on town properties and the business zones themselves.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Rucci from the commissioners? Go ahead, Mr. Swerdlow.
I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Hold on, Mr. Pratt, I'm going to let Mr. Swerdlow go first and we'll come to you
Okay.
second, okay?
Certainly.
Just trying to get my head wrapped around this for the planning part versus the zoning part of this. So on page 4, you're showing an existing conditions site plan. Just want to clarify everything.
No, that's just an old map. That's just an old map from 1955 showing when the properties were first developed. I haven't provided you guys with any like today surveys of what the property looks like.
So this is not, this site plan you're showing doesn't reflect what's there.
No, it was just giving you sort of an overview of when this was created, what the lots were looking like. It was just an example.
But
of
you
the
will
doing.
be providing.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so on page 25, you're showing a proposed site plan. It just says plan, but it actually doesn't say anything.
this was something that we came up to show an example that did have a survey on it that references those two renderings that you saw earlier.
Well, I'm gonna get to those.
Yeah.
Okay. So on page 24, going back one, what you title view here, that's from Richmond Hill?
Correct.
Now, if you put that in context, that view, every house around it and across the street have colonnades,
I'm sorry, have what?
columns.
Oh, columns, yes,
And the existing house has columns.
yes.
Okay.
Not 14, but 20 does.
20.
Street one,
Yeah,
yeah.
the street one
Nice.
does.
Okay, but in this, you're showing basically an entrance that has a view of basically the garage from the street. And a side, what appears to be a side view from the front of the building.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm not gonna go into detailed comments now, but I don't think this comports with the character of the rest of the street.
I agree. We agree with that.
And really needs to have somebody, develop with a series of alternatives and something that has more appropriateness to what you're planning here.
Understood.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, this is just kind of a hypothetical question, maybe for Steve Kleppen or Dave. Provided you were, somehow restricted on redeveloping this as is, would you even be able to yield apartments or units of the same size as you have now based on existing building codes and egress and ADA compliance and whatnot?
The only thing that we'd be able to really put in is a two-family. That's probably the best that we could do. And even those have some challenges to them as far as the setbacks go. We would try to utilize the 15-foot setbacks from the B residence zone for the two-family, but we certainly couldn't use any of the density that we have today. Like, so we have 4 units today, we would have to go to a two-family. That's probably the only thing. And we had some issues with even putting that in, which I'm not recalling at the time right now what that was. The rear lot is more difficult than the front lot, than 20. I don't know, Steve, if you have anything on that.
No, nothing further. I just say, I think something you touched on is important though at the end about the B zone. If you look at, I would say, take a look at your B zone regulations versus your apartment zone regulations. And if you're thinking, the way the downtown's set up, where you have your downtown, then your apartment zone, which should be your most dense zone, and then it kind of gets less dense as you move away from the core. The B zone regulations in terms of the setbacks are really aren't that much different. So I think you need to, consider that as you're making decisions going forward.
So the B zone would give you 15 feet on the sides, which is sort of why we use that in our proposal today.
But if you're building a single family home in the B zone, it's actually 8 feet.
Yeah.
So,
That's right.
even more bulk, but.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Rucci, did you get what you needed from us?
Yeah,
today?
so I just to quickly go through it, the commission's obviously looking for some more thought and process on the 35% coverage and how that really is going to work within this zone. Second, in other words, why can't you just build it at 25%, right? And then the density, and then we're going to also look into and I'm really proposing now that second one on the sheet that's on there. And then obviously we'll take a look at architectural plans, stuff like that. But like I said, we don't have anything really attached to this quite yet. But it's helpful to hear things that you're asking about. We're gonna also look at the infrastructure and the drainage on site. And I guess the question is going from a density perspective with the 35%, what can you really build and what can you not build at 25%? I think what I may try to do is give you some examples of, okay, this is what 3 units may look like at 25% versus what 3 units may look like at 35%. And that may give a good idea as to like, okay, well, you have like one little kitchen and then you have a dining room, and then you go upstairs, or whatever it happens to be. and then be able to deal with the parking and have the landscaping and all that other stuff. Height is not changing, so the height would remain the same on the properties. I'm sorry, the height limitation would remain the same in the zone. And did I miss anything else?
Is Commissioner Chris, one more question, a clarification, reveal my potential ignorance or likely ignorance. So let's say you're allowed under, so I guess the grandfathering of the size to go down if you want to. Let's say for some reason that building disappears and burns up in a fire, let's say. Can you revert to the higher one? Or once you go down, you stay down? Is it a ratchet
No.
effect, or can you return to the status quo ante?
My understanding is that if you burn out, you can still build to the same thing that you had before, so long as you show to the town that that's what you're planning on doing.
Okay,
We've had that issue up on,
okay.
can't remember where it was. Up in the northwest.
But I think what he was saying though is if you originally had a 5-unit and we rebuilt a 3-unit and that 3-unit burned down, was your question saying,
Go back to
go
the
back to the
5.
5-unit?
No, I don't believe so. Not after we
Okay,
lost
so-
non-conforming.
Once you
You
decrease it,
abandoned?
it stays
Yeah,
decreasing.
we would have
Got it. That's my
abandoned it.
question.
Yeah. We would have abandoned it.
That's his hand raised.
Okay.
Oh, all right. Mr. Engel, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think if you're reviewing the feedback that you've gotten from the commission, I think it's important, I heard earlier that you point out to us why this isn't spot zoning, why this isn't, that you give a comprehensive review over what else is going on in the zone. I also have a tough time with writing a text change while during a period of time when we've already begun overhauling our regulations. So to do a text change that thinks about the whole zone and increasing coverage in it, while at the same time we're reviewing our regulations, seems to me, and the hardship you cite is purely financial. My client can't make money. You said the word financial, and you said, difficulty, making money on this. I think that's a tough reason for me to go along with a text change in the while we're reviewing our zoning regulations.
Well, just to answer that, all I'm trying to say is that you're talking about non-conforming properties already in this zone. So as a commission, as a planning board, you should always be trying to reduce non-conformities in one way, shape, or form, or make them more conforming, which is what this text change would essentially do. So that's what we're talking about today. Is you have all these properties within this zone that are non-conforming as to density, as to setback, and no one can redevelop any of them based on that, except unless you want to redevelop a single family home, which is not necessarily what the apartment zone is designed for from a plan of conservation development. It's designed for more density.
But
So
that's why we're that's why we're writing our zoning regulations, rewriting our zoning regulations to address non-conformity, to address what we'd like to see going forward.
And I think this is helpful to that. I mean, I would propose to you that this is a helpful exercise to see this type of a change, because this could work within you addressing that particular zone, apartment zone.
I'll also just add, in defense of the applicant, they brought this to my attention, multiple months ago. And, as a courtesy, the application was, submitted even with the knowledge that, we are starting a text change soon. And so I do think that the commission should soon consider closing the book on text amendments, but seeing as we don't have a consultant onboarded yet, and we are still probably a few months away, the commission may want to consider what is and isn't fair. And I agree. I don't think 5 months from now, we should be changing the zoning regulations if we're deep in a, text, deep in our update, but, so just for additional context, that's how we got here.
I think it's a very real possibility that the result of our, as you say, the POCD, I think it's a very real possibility that the result of our zoning changes will be that we favor more smaller density with more smaller units in the center of town. So I'm not sure that this is consistent with the POCD. Affordability is a very important part of the POCD. And what you're talking about is making fewer large luxury units, I think that's counter to the POCD. That's why I'd like to see us go through the process and make those decisions before we entertain text changes.
Yeah, just as a point of context, we keep on saying small or larger units. Right now, it's the small, when we're referring to smaller units, they're like 600 square feet and maybe 700 square feet. These are studios and barely one bedroom apartments. Well, we're not trying to propose 3,000 or 4,000 square foot units. We're really trying to propose with basements, 2,400 square feet units, maybe 28, and they're all under 3,000. And that's with attics and basements. I just want to just make that context clear that on the first 2 floors, it's maybe like 1,400 square feet, which is, I'm not sure if that's considered a large or small, but when I think of large, I think of 3,000 or 4,000 square foot units. I don't think of 1,500 or 2,200 square foot units as being large, but maybe I'm wrong in that matter.
All right, commissioners, I do want to wrap this up because we do have the Waveney Care Center left. Next, Mr. Engel, do you have one more thing you want to say on this?
Yeah, I just want to say we just approved 900 square foot units on Main Street a month or so ago, next town hall. And my mother lives in a 900 square foot unit on God's Acre. So I think there's plenty of precedent for, and by the way, I used to rent out the units you're talking about, the 600 square foot unit. I rented that out about 5 years ago to a client, and there was huge demand for those 600 to 1,000 square foot units. So, and I think there's huge demand for them now. That's all.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Mr.
All right,
Ritchie.
thank you. Thank you.
Have a good night.
I'm recused on this.
Thank you.
Next application, number 3 on the agenda, number 3 Farm Road. Upon application of Waveney Care Center Incorporated, authorized agent for Town of New Canaan owner for a site plan and special permit approval pursuant to section 8.2.A and B, 5.1.E.1, and 6.5.B.4 to allow the addition of a new structure for a not-for-profit community health facility and to permit retaining walls exceeding 4 feet in height in the Waveney zone at 3 Farm Road, map 31, block 51, lot 111. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Michael Sweeney, Harmony, Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy. Pleased to be here this evening for Waveney Care Center. You may recall where we left it off last month. I think we made our full presentation. Thanks for the time for squeezing us in that evening. I think we got through everything fairly well. At the end of the evening, there are a few questions that were posed and need some clarification, some more information. So what we tried to do over the past few weeks is give you a submission, which you have, but we tried to gather up the questions for clarification, and you have that which we submitted. So I won't go through it and read through it. I know you have that already. But what we tried to do was to address each of the questions and give you our reasoning and what our thought process was in our original presentation. We've also made some changes too in reaction to the questions that were posed that evening. So just as a brief outline, I think one of the main questions that we will be addressing, I think we'll address that first off. I think were questions posed by Mr. Radman, maybe Mr. Schwerdel, if I'm remembering correctly, and what the nature of the exterior of the building was going to look like, as well as some screening issues and some night lighting issues. Mr. Miles Brown from Amenta Emma Architects is here this evening, and we'll ask him speak to that initially. Also, there's some questions on the landscape design. You have a submission from West Stout Associates from Mr. Tom Cross. We made some modifications to the planting plan, and he also presents some of his reasoning as to why certain plants were located in certain locations around the site, keeping in mind the nature of the use on the property at Waveney Care Center. And then there's some more miscellaneous issues that were after that we address in our letter. One goes to connectivity with Waveney Park, and we give you our reasoning as to why the way our lease area is encapsulated now, that it doesn't really lend itself to a connection to, the walking trails in Waveney. We talk about parking, and we give you some information as to why this is sort of the obverse of probably what you usually see with applications, where the applicant is struggling to meet a parking requirement, making arguments as to why we think we'll fit under the threshold. This is a case where actually we're exceeding the bare bones requirement, but making the case to you as to, from our traffic study, as well as from our own experience on the site, why the additional parking is needed not only for operations, but also to guard against any parking that might travel off-site. Given the location of the property on Farm Road, there really is no way for parking to go on the side streets except encroaching into the South School or perhaps the high school. We talked about EV chargers at the application presented last, and what we're suggesting is to set up with our general contractors the infrastructure ready to install EV charging stations in the event that we see that there's a need among our visitors to the site, as well as our employees and other visitors to the site. We give you some information that really hasn't been our experience. We've taken a poll, and Mr. Barksdale can speak to this additionally as well, but we will get ready to do that when the demand arises. We also spoke about construction traffic to the site. I think we spoke about it narratively, and I'm not sure if we had the chance to put up a chart. We included that in our material as well to make sure that all the construction traffic coming from the south, from Stanford and Darien, travel over roadways that keeps it away from South School, the middle school, as well as the high school. And lastly, I think there was a question posed perhaps by Mr. Knowles that some of the language in our text was a little confusing, so we tried to clarify that, and we tweaked the text change language as well. So that's sort of the outline of the material that you have in front of you. Hopefully you've addressed everything well, but if not, we'll try again this evening. But perhaps initially we'll start with Mr. Brown to talk about the exterior of the building.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. Miles Brown with Amenta Emma Architects. The building for us was, the inspiration was the natural surroundings. I think one of the commissioner members mentioned the last time, the building really sits nicely in the natural landscape. You see trees, you see lots of vegetation. We know that inspires health and well-being of the residents. And so the building material that we chose was terracotta. I'm glad that several of you mentioned you like that material. We love the material. We think it will help the building sort of blend into the natural material surrounding. We brought some samples. I don't know if I pass these around. Here's a kind of actual, physical sample of the terracotta. This is about 1.25 inches thick. We're proposing something that's a little bit thicker than that, so we can get some reveal in undulation. I can pass this around. We're looking for a warm color. You can get this material in hundreds of shades of warm and cool, but I think we're looking at somewhere in this sort of range. As we go through the design process, we'll be ordering larger samples, many materials, bringing them out to the site, studying them in the light against the existing building. But we sort of think we're in this range. It would be that we would probably pick, these are representative of a color. This is sort of, natural terracotta. This is a clay. This is called cinnamon. But you can see that the actual material itself has variation within. You can see from this piece to this piece, there's a little bit of variation, just like a brick or any natural material. So that's kind of where we're at. But yeah, and obviously the exterior of the building was also inspired by sort of the modern iconic modern history of New Canaan architecture. And those are sort of the two things that inspire us. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'll just say I thought your submission additional submission was very helpful with, you know, where the inspiration came from and all of that. Thank you.
One thing I neglected to mention, Ms. Carey added some suggested conditions to an approval, and we're in full accord with that, that we think they're appropriate, fair, and consistent with what we've represented to the commission.
So,
Just make sure the mic's on.
oh. It's not on. So one of the questions last time was, you had proposed both wood and terracotta, but that was based on budget consideration.
Yeah.
Where are you at with that now? Is it still based on that, or is the design now contingent on using these materials?
The terracotta material is, we're committing to using that for the building. We're gonna make that work. The other question about wood, and I do have some samples, we can show this around, but the underside of the canopy, we're really trying to light that up and have a warm material on the underside of the ceiling as well. We're dealing with healthcare facility, and our exterior materials have to be Class A fire rated. So the actual ability to use real wood may not be feasible. So we've got some choices of some aluminum clad, they look like natural wood. You guys have seen a lot of faux finishes these days that really can simulate that very well. So that's the intent for the underside, is to use a aluminum exterior plank-like wood material for that. So
For the undercroft?
yeah, it's not as much of a cost issue with the underside of that as it is durability, maintenance, and fire rating. So.
And you have samples?
Yeah, we have, there's again, a million colors to pick from, but here's a sample board. Again, we'll be kind of going through the process as we do during the design development to hone in on what exactly color that might be, but there's several manufacturers that make a product like this, Armstrong being one. This will be about 13 and a half feet, you know.
That was
above, yeah. So it's a bit further away from your eye than a typical, you know, sort of 10-foot ceiling. In this case.
I also appreciate the updated renderings, both the evening renderings with the downlighting along the entryway. I think that helps articulate that entrance really well, as well as the street side and daytime street side views, looking back and understanding the, you know, the additional landscaping and screening that'll be going on there. That helps a lot.
Great.
Is there going to be, with the patient rooms on the second floor, as well as the first floor with the arcade there, 13 feet of glass, evening shading conditions? Is there going to be solar shades on the windows?
Absolutely. On the patient rooms, we'll have blackout shades at the night, possibly, you know, 2 levels of shading, one for allow some light to come through. On the underside, I think we have to talk that through a little bit.
I don't know if it's needed. I'm just asking.
It probably wouldn't be needed on the underside. I think we want to see through that building. You know, there's a, you know, greenway beyond, and that space wants to sort of just be visually open and all the way through.
I just have the offices are on the side, so if they're 6, 7 o'clock.
Yes,
like
those
probably, it's only be talking about the
lobby. The lobby would probably have no shading on that side, but I think some of the offices, likely have some. Yeah.
Would the windows on the second floor be operable? I guess not with the terracotta.
Yeah, I don't think they would be. They would not be operable. We'd have mechanical fresh air brought in.
Okay. And have there been any changes to the landscaping plan?
Yes. Have Tom Cross maybe come forward, and he can give more details on the submission that you have as part of your package.
Good evening, everybody. Tom Cross from Wesley Stout Associates. So there were a couple of modifications to the landscaping plan. We sent a memo with a few things to clarify. The first was the native and adaptive plant materials. Second were responses to a couple of plant selections, one being the ginkgo tree, which we selected it due to its medicinal and spiritual significance being in the healing garden. And we also carried that out into the parking lot. So what we did was we changed the species in the parking lot to a more native version. So it's the fastigiate sweet gum called Slender Silhouette. And then we were asking if we could maintain the ginkgo trees in the healing garden, which is between that lobby and the existing building, to have that spiritual and medicinal significance representation. The other plant selection that was raised were about the dwarf lilac shrubs. And Wes from our office, I don't know if anybody knows this, but created the first memory healing garden in Greenwich, and specifically used plants like lilacs, roses, hydrangeas, echinacea, rudbeckia, that stir memories for residents and patients. And this one had special significance because unlike some of the others, it has a fragrance that you can smell and cue memories. Additionally, we wanted to clarify some of the seasonal interest, and that there's a combination of evergreen and deciduous trees and shrubs, as well as ground cover that's semi-evergreen and flowering shrubs and winter interest shrubs as well. Lastly, we added 5 screening trees along the entrance driveway to provide some additional buffering of the building from Farm Road. That's reflected on the landscape plans as well as in Amenta Emma's updated rendering of the streetscape.
This Commissioner Chris, I have a couple of questions on that, if I may.
Sure.
Regarding your point 2 on your submission.
Yes.
I would agree it was that ginkgo biloba the leaves are used for memory care for cognitive issues. I prefer bacopa rather than that, but I'm not sure you're going to use it for harvest the leaves and all that. But you mentioned the sort of the spiritual issues. I've probably been in over 24 Buddhist temples and monasteries. I don't recall any ginkgos. I may have missed them. The shift to a slender silhouette sweet gum, I think, is a good choice. My years here, when people submit a ginkgo, is usually because they want it tall and go straight up. And it's sort of the conformity of the tree that they're looking for, as well as something that's relatively robust. They tend to do well in street trees. They handle pollution and nasty elements reasonably well. And that tends to be the go-to thing. My own suggestion would be that use the slender silhouette sweet gum for all of them, but I'll sort of leave that as is. I hear on the dwarf lilac, 5 sense issues. You can see it and smell it. Rosemary would be a nice addition too, maybe in pots. You get to touch it too. You get the third. You can even cut it and use it for culinary purposes. It's very common, but tends to be pretty.
They do have, we haven't gotten into that level of detail, but on the existing patios that they have at the facility, there are raised planters where things like rosemary can be done on a seasonal basis. That's a good idea.
It was rosemary for remembrance is the sort of secret language of plants. But anyway, on point 4, witch hazel is actually not the first one in spring. It's in an autumn. It blooms in October and November, not in spring. Just as a item. I have a witch hazel on my property and I checked, and it's according to the USDA, it's also in the autumn. So I just mentioned that it's not a spring plant. If you want an early spring plant, you're probably looking at something like bloodroot, which is very nice, rarely used wildflower, very pretty. It doesn't last long, but it's a lovely flower. But it's I think witch hazel is a great choice, but it's an autumn bloomer. So when all the leaves are down, and you see the bare branches, then it blooms. It sort of makes a statement. So I think it's a very good choice, and it's a nice medicinal one. So beyond those comments, I think in particular, a number of the choices in some of the wetlands areas, some rarely used pollinator-friendly plants, I thought was a very good choice. As I think I mentioned last time, so I want to reiterate, this is a very good choice. It's encouraging to see those used more and more in commercial developments. They may not be necessarily the showiest, but I think they generate a lot of positivity for the environment, and also attract pollinators and butterflies, which is something I think you would probably want to have in those environments. So those are my comments on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioners, anything further on the landscaping? Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Sweeney, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the parking?
I quoted the parking regulation in my letter. Then I also thought it might be interesting to look at the regulation as it reads in the residential zone, which also allows for nursing facilities. And each of them sort of carries a similar theme. And that's the parking would be at least to the standard that's set forth in the regulation. So the point of departure from the commission is, that's a minimum threshold, but of course, I think the commission had the right to look at operations and query whether that was sufficient under a particular application. Moreover, in the residential zone, again, we're in the Waveney zone, but I thought it was helpful just to get a sense of, I think, what the commission was thinking when these regulations were passed, that parking would be adequate in the opinion of the commission to provide for residents, employees, and visitors. So that's the approach that we took with our traffic consultant, as well as with the examination of the operations on the site. We've given you some information about the use of the parking lot during the weekday, which actually is the busiest time with visitors, employees, volunteers to the site, as well as additional celebrations, community events, educational events that take place on site. The parking is used. So we have a peak number of the 148 or so, but the additional parking will be used. And when we have events, we'll be concerned about parking overflowing to neighboring sites. So, and we saw this as a positive, that it's rare that, I bring an application that I can say, hey, we have an extra handful, actually more than a handful of parking spaces. I think the other thing to keep in mind too is that I think the site works. We're not trying to cram too much into a small site. The site is small, although it's a lease line. But keep in mind as well, please, that of the entire site of 12 acres or so, about 30% or so is wetlands and open space, mainly to the south and around the edges. So it's a pretty open site, but the actual parking is really needed. And we may try to make a case for it here and give you some examples of the events that occur over the course of a year when that parking demand is present.
And just remind us, what is the current number of parking spots on the site?
145.
145, and you're proposing 175?
Correct. Essentially, we have 30 additional spots for the extra 30 rooms that are being added. There's sort of a rule of thumb that we used.
Mm-hmm.
And the parking has been approved, obviously, by the Inland Wetlands Commission as well, where we were anywhere near the wetlands, but we never encroach into the wetlands.
So you mentioned the parking peaked, you had a peak reading of 148 spaces at June of 2024. What is your average parking daily? I mean, you have different shifts of staff coming in and out of the building, and I would assume, would it be weekdays or weekends where you have the most amount of visitors?
It's weekdays, but with your permission, I don't want to speak. Maybe I'll have our traffic consultant come forward who
Sure.
speak to that, or Russ, you want to speak then? Russ, actually, you come forward too, because you can speak to,
Make me get up. I was comfortable.
you know the site.
Hi, Russ Barksdale, President and CEO of Waveney Life Care Network. Thank you. Good to see everyone. Our peaks are usually in the morning as people are coming into work. Administrative staff is usually around 9:30. Then you'll have a peak exodus in around 4 o'clock, 4:30, 5 to about 6 o'clock. When we looked at the ebb and flow of visitors normally come around lunchtime and they either come and have lunch and dine with people, or they'll come after lunch in between activities, things of that nature. So that's our kind of our ebb and flow. We do a lot of programs as Mike had indicated in our submission. These are just a few. We do programs for essential services. We do programs for the police department, showing appreciation, EMS, things of that nature. We do chamber music and celebration of life. We talked about butterflies at our last presentation. So people that have lost loved ones, we want to have their ability to come on site and remember their loved ones, and also to thank the staff that became family to them. So as we looked at those peaks and flows and we looked at the celebration of life and some of the other activities, we felt that was a good number to meet, given the addition of the 30 beds. I'm not sure it's a direct answer to your question, but that's how, from a visitation standpoint to our staffing point, is how those ebb and flows occur.
Do you have a metric on what your average, I know there's ebbs and flows because of events, et cetera, but exclusive of events, just daily, the typical workday of the 145 spots, how many are usually occupied? What percentage is occupied?
Well, I would go back to, it depends on the time of the year. We get a lot more visitors during the summer than we do in the winter, because you have a lot of people from this area, as you probably know, are going to Florida or in Naples. And so they're less likely to visit. So it really depends on the time of the year. I would say the spring and right before school goes back, those are the times of the years that get the most visitation, if you will, from our residents' point of view, because those are their peers, if you will, that have already retired and either have a place someplace else or don't come out and visit when there's two inches of snow or an inch of snow on the ground.
Understood. Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioners, anything further?
I just have on the text amendment component. I think the you've highlighted it in your submission, but I think the first words highlighted, a new building, or should be deleted, because this is simply with respect to an addition to an existing building devoted to a nonprofit community health facility.
The reason we used the conjunction was we had parroted from the original regulation, which talked about a new building. And then I think when we spoke last time, there was a question whether this was a new building or whether it was an addition. So, that's why we used or, the conjunction or. It doesn't really matter to us, but I just wanted you to know that we were just bringing down the language from the regulation. And we added addition because I thought that's what was not clear, whether this was an addition or a new building.
Yeah, I mean, I think the second part of it is fine. It's just the new building component, because this is, unless you tell me wrong, this is not a new building. This is an existing building that's being added onto. So.
Yeah, I agree. It's an addition.
Yep.
But
It works.
We'll accept the amendment. How's that?
Okay.
Mr. Spridlo?
Yes, I have, well, I just want to go back to the facade for a moment. So if you want to start up.
Just stay nice.
So I think the additional renderings you showed us, which were really quite illuminative of the proposed project, suggests that there's a number of different materials used on the facade in addition to the terracotta. There seems to be some panelized materials above and below the windows. Do you want to describe that?
Yeah, so the panels that go above and below between the pieces of terracotta would most likely be some type of pre-finished cementitious facade material that is, a rain screen, very durable. And, we'll definitely get color samples of that material too. We want it to be sort of warm, but have a little bit of contrast. So we're trying to get that vertical read above and below those windows to be a little bit different.
I mean, actually, the facade is quite musical, right? It's like a series of notes, the way you design this. But it's unclear as to, how you're going to segment these materials and the relationship of the panels to the windows to the terracotta. The rendering is very, what's the right word? Very interesting. I had the word in mind, but I use that. But it doesn't clarify the exact use of the materials in relationship to each other.
Okay, we could clarify
So,
that. I mean,
yeah, at some point. maybe we'll
Yeah.
come back.
yeah, the terracotta would run in front of that material, so it casts a little bit of a shadow, but
The layers aren't clear.
Yeah.
How it connects to the underprop is not clear, but at some point, I'm sure.
Well, but we want to make it clear. So, I mean, we have, as our submission was, we reaffirmed what the exterior finish and skin was across the entire. So,
Yeah.
As much details as you can provide, I mean, we're happy to
It's
To
really
affirm
nice
that.
Really nice red ones.
Okay. Great.
I think Commissioner Engel has his hand raised.
Mr. Engel?
I think it's a really beautiful project, and I think it's going to be a great asset to the community. My question was on parking. I'm wondering whether you considered a parking plan with more spaces, whether it's even possible. As I study the map, I don't know if it's possible. And I wondered whether you could address the fact that because your parking lot is so close to the sports fields, and the sports fields get more and more intense use all the time, whether you find yourself providing parking to the sports community from time to time, and do they soak up parking in your lot?
Three great questions, Commissioner. The first was, our first rendering actually had the road going around the building and parking actually jettisoned inside. And we really felt strongly that we needed more outdoor space for our residents that were away from parking, away from noise, that were more in nature. And we talked about the pollinator gardens. We talked about a lot of different things. And we wanted to keep the parking out front to allow those wandering gardens for people that suffer from Alzheimer's dementia, but also remembrances and fragrances and butterflies and hospice and all of those things that you think about. I apologize, I haven't been to a Buddhist colony, so I can't comment on that. And in terms of the gum tree, I just hope it doesn't get on my shoe. But other than that, I'm just wanted to make sure that this was very warm and inviting. And that was the challenges that we had to our landscape architects. To your other point, John, Commissioner Engel, is that we did at certain points of the time, especially during the summer, had some people parking in our parking lots on the far left-hand side as you're facing our facility and using that and walking up that hill. We've since kind of blocked that off a little bit, and we've also, we actually reached out to our police department, who actually went through and from time to time drive through our parking lot. Our staff are very vocal. If they see someone parking there, they'll normally knock on their window and ask them if they're visitors or not. So we've tried to take a very, not aggressive approach to it, but an educational approach to people that have tried to park there and use the fields. And thus far, it seems to be working. We don't seem to have those problems like we had 2 summers ago.
Okay. Commissioners, anything further? Commissioners on Zoom, anyone? Okay. Do you guys have anything further from your team?
No, sir.
Public comment?
You did that last month, so no requirement. to do
Not
that.
required. Okay. I guess we can close this application then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks.
Watch the White Lotus and see if it's first call.
Season 1 or 3?
There you go.
And 82 Brookwood Lane was continued for next month. Give everyone a minute to first. All right, commissioners, we should go back and we need to vote on the items we've discussed tonight. The first one being the Elm Street, well, not the Elm Street, but the property in question on Elm Street, but the zoning regulation text change to amend the section 4.4 of the business A zone to allow pet grooming facilities.
Can you just clarify for each application who's seated, since some people were recused on certain applications, just so the record is clear for the minutes and whatnot?
Sure. So for this particular application, I believe we had everyone, including all the regular commissioners that are present, including
Commissioner Engel was recused. No?
on this one. No, I don't think so.
On the Business A text amendment?
I'm recused on the Grove Street, Elm Street.
Street,
Oh,
Elm
that's
Street.
this one.
So yeah,
Oh, that's this one,
the
okay.
Business A.
Sorry, so he's
Yeah,
recused on
okay.
this one. Okay. So on this one, we have all regular commission members and all 3 alternates included in this one.
I don't believe I was seated.
Bill, John's recusing himself, so we have an open slot that you can vote on this one.
If any of the newer alternates aren't ready to vote, we do have a quorum.
Yeah, we do have
If
one. So if you don't feel
someone's
comfortable
not-
voting on it, that's totally fine too. So commissioners, any additional discussion on this particular application?
Commissioner Chris, it just, before we vote on it, if we could have the exact wording of the alter change. You proposed it, so
I have it written down. and I
good.
don't-
So we know
okay.
exactly what we're voting on.
Okay, so also I recommend a effective date of March 3rd for the, so when we
Monday?
vote. Yeah,
Okay.
so next Monday would be the effective date. I'm just double checking my memo to make sure I'm not. Yeah, so March 3rd. And then the text change is pet, so this is under permitted uses via special permit in the business A zone, would be new line item number 6. Pet grooming facilities shall be permitted on lots with a minimum area of 20,000 square feet. Such facilities must operate as an accessory use to the primary business on the premises and shall be located in a separate designated room within the building. Grooming facilities shall not have outdoor pet exercise areas. And so, just as a reminder for everyone, this means that anyone with a lot larger than 20,000 square feet in Business A could submit a special permit application to propose this use, and they would just have to meet the special permit criteria. And then they could get their approval. So it is the largest zone. It is permitted. Specialty services are permitted in your business B and your business D zones, but those are very, very small zones. So, this would allow it in a larger zone, but it's, still protecting the main part of Elm, like the center part of Elm and Main Street and Forest Street. So
Personally, I don't think we're gonna have a proliferation of members in the business zone over the next few years, so.
I move to approve.
Commissioner Chris, I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Knag, Commissioner Knag, do you want to give a reason for approval?
I think it's reasonable that to fill in the gap as to the availability of persons wishing to do pet grooming to locate in this area. And I think they made a reasonable case that it was consistent with the existing uses.
Okay,
And so that motion is for the effective date of March 3rd.
March 3rd.
Right, just as you articulated.
And I'll just add to the rationale that, our POCD talks about having a vibrant downtown, and I think allowing a variety of service-related uses contributes to that vibrancy.
With appropriate limits to minimize potential neighbor disturbance.
Agreed. Okay, call to vote. Dan Radman, I vote yes. Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
John Chris,
Yes.
John Engel. Oh, sorry, John Engel's recused. Paul Knag,
Yes.
Alan Swerdlow,
Yes.
Eric Knowles,
Yes.
Christina Larson,
Yes.
Megan Mensching,
Yes.
and Bill Pratt.
Yes.
This one passes. Next application is for the text amendment concerning
That
the,
was continued to the March.
oh, this was continued, that's right. Okay. And then Farm Road, this was item number 3 and 4. 3 was the site plan and special permit, and number 4 is the text amendment to the zoning regulations for the Waveney Care Center at 3 Farm Road.
So you can discuss them, together, but there will have to be separate motions for each application, and you should, when you're ready to vote, do the text change first. And the effective date for the text change should also be March 3rd, and then the effective date for the special permit should be after that. So it could be March 4th, it just has to be after the regulation is active,
Okay.
assuming you're trying to approve it.
Fine. So let's discuss item number 4, the text change first. To the zoning regulations, if you all don't have it in front of you, it's on the website, or I'll read it real quick just to give everyone a synopsis on
Pull
this.
it up on the screen.
You can put it up on the screen as well. In connection with the special permit under 51E1 of these regulations for new permanent built for a renovation, or what are we saying?
For an addition.
For an addition for a not-for-profit community health facility use, the commission may modify the height and coverage limitations in 51F when it finds that all of the following conditions have been satisfied. A, increase in building coverage may be permitted and shall not cause total building coverage that exceed 25%. The increase in building height may be permitted, shall not cause total building height to exceed 40 feet and 2.5 stories. C, the granting of the modification furthers one or more of the stated purposes in section 51A of the regulations. And D, the granting of the modification will not negatively impact other permitted uses in the Waveney zone. E, the granting of the modification will not hinder or discourage the appropriate use or development of adjacent property or the neighborhood. And F, the proposed new construction is consistent with all other standards contained in these regulations. So, commissioners, I think these are reasonable, given the lot size, the position, the context relative to the overall parcel of Waveney as a whole, and the adjacencies to Farm Road and 106, proximity of neighbors. I think these are all reasonable allowances for coverage and for height for this particular text amendment.
I would agree, and I would just add that, as much as I don't love making text changes for specific projects. I think that this one is born out of the fact that we have one zone with a variety of uses and a single set of dimensional standards. And so therefore, in order to make anything, including what's existing on this property, viable, there has to be a text change. So I am good with it.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Nielsen. I mean, I think because of the non-for-profit component, I'm in favor of kind of how it serves the town and serves the greater community. I think, as I said on other applications where it's smaller and narrower and private, that's a concern and kind of the I have a lot, I want to zone it this way. But I think because of the holistic approach to, not-for-profit community, how it's going to help everybody, I think this is a good text amendment for that site. Also, particularly because of the kind of regulations that are a bit odd in the Waveney zone, and maybe could be tinkered with in the future. And yes, to remove that a new building or in the highlighted yellow, I think would be, because if this building were to burn down, I don't think the special permit should still be, kind of available for a new build. But
Commissioner Engel has his hand raised.
Commissioner Engel.
Really glad to see that 25% coverage in there, even though the site has many challenges, including 30% wetlands. The applicant has managed to design his project within and respecting the 25% coverage. Really like to see that. Just like to point that out, since we're only talking about this application.
So that's a new regulation, just to be clear. 25% is a new proposal, just to be clear.
I understand.
Date and the effective date, Ms. Curie?
For the text change, March 3rd, and,
Good.
Before there's an official motion, who's recused, who's seated, are all the alternates comfortable voting? Because I know Ms. Larson was, okay, you're, Mr. Pinov recused, Ms. Larson was absent last month, but.
I was absent.
Okay, so you're not voting, just to be clear?
Yes.
Okay. And then Commissioner Menching and Commissioner Pratt, you're comfortable voting on this application?
Yes.
I am.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
Commissioner Chris, I move we approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Engel? Commissioner Chris, would you like to state reasoning for the approval or for the proposal?
Are there any conditions? Oh, wait, sorry, no, this is text change. Never mind.
I see this as fundamentally enhancing the depth and breadth of capacity of a key facility in town, supporting the health and welfare of the people of the town of New Canaan. And this is very supportive of that.
Agreed. Anything further, commissioners?
I think it's consistent with the original deed of gift, or whatever you want to call it, the original intent of dividing Waveney into its constituent uses. So I don't think that this is an example of spot zoning. I think it's just an example of evolving the zoning for this particular use.
Gotcha. Okay. Call to vote.
Also, just to be clear, this would be as part of it, 3rd of March would be the effective date.
Correct. Call to vote. Dan Radman, I vote yes. Krista Nielsen?
Yes.
John Chris?
Yes.
John Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Knag is recused. Alan Swerdlow?
Yes.
Eric Knowles?
Yes.
Megan Menching?
Yes.
And Bill Pratt?
Yes.
Okay. This text amendment is approved. Next item we have is item 3 on the agenda, actually, which is the the formal application for site plan and special permit approval for the Waveney Care Center as submitted. Any discussions on that, commissioners?
Yes, a couple of things about the facade. They've illustrated quite a compelling facade. It's musical, it's lyrical, it has depth to it, it has different colorations and materials to it. The only concern I have, and you could see this in the renderings from tonight, that you couldn't see clearly prior to tonight, is that there's a third material that's not been described of. That's a significant amount of material. And that's those panels that we talked about at the end. So while I think this is a great project, I love what they've done, I would like to see more detail on what they're proposing there.
Okay. Commissioners, anything else? Any other comments?
Commissioner Chris, I think it's a very important project for the health and welfare of the town. I think it is sitting within the site in a very creative way. I think enhances the site, frankly, and to an extent. I would also note that regarding potential conditions we may want to include, several have been suggested by the town planner. The first being that any and all outstanding comments from the engineering department must be addressed to the satisfaction of the town engineer prior to issuance of a zoning permit. That seems like a very reasonable condition to me, so I would be supportive of that. Second one is in the event that the terracotta facade just isn't working out, the applicant would need to resubmit, and we would sort of start square one as far as facade goes. That seems reasonable to me as well. Regarding the landscape plan, I think there's a lot to recommend it. A few things I would do differently, but I don't want to sort of get stuck in the weeds too much. I think they did a really very good job, much better than many of the applications I've seen. So I want to give them a shout out there. So I would be okay with that. And regarding an effective date would be the
March 4th,
which would be the day after the effective date of the text amendment. Seems reasonable to me. I cannot think of another condition I would add. I think this is quite comprehensive.
So to address Mr. Swerdlow's concerns, submission of the remaining material sample, is that something we could do as a condition of approval rather than making them come back next month?
Yeah, so I mean, you closed the application, so you can't make them come back next month because the public hearing's closed, so you could do some sort of condition. You just have to think about what the purpose of them coming back. Is it because you're like, are you approving this additional material? Because I mean, just coming back for the sake of coming back. They could, you know, provide information to me, so it's just, what is the purpose of, do you want to approve this additional material? If you do, they should come back. If you just want to know what it is, and you should have kept it open.
Mr. Swerdlow, I mean, how
it's two conflicting issues here. This is a great project. What they've shown to us, in my opinion, works very well on the site in every respect. But then there's this kind of mysterious material that all of a sudden became part of the conversation tonight. And when it's just, it was described as, I believe, textured concrete or something to that effect.
Fiber cement concrete, fiber cement panels.
I would love to see a sample of that. I don't want to delay this though. So I'm conflicted. Do you have any ideas?
I mean, they can submit the additional sample of material for record to the planner, who can then share it with us for comment. You know, we can condition the approval on the fact that they would need to use a fiber cement material as represented. And if it were to change, then they would have to come back to us, just like they would have to come back to us if the terracotta were to change.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you could change the condition I have specific to the terracotta facade, and you could just say in the event.
Any facade materials.
Any facade materials change.
Right.
The applicant shall return to the commission.
Yeah, like I can completely understand their concern over the wood cladding on the underside on the soffit leading in. There's combustibility and fire rating issues, and honestly, 13 feet up, you're never going to tell the difference if it's an aluminum plank that looks like wood.
No, I agree with that. And so that's why I'm not discussing that part of it.
Sure.
It's not my preference, but it seems reasonable in terms of the conditions. What do you think about the fiber cement?
I think there's many brands out there, but the good ones, they look great and they hold up really well. They're equivalent to the terracotta material in terms of durability and longevity. They're, no issues with color fastness or anything like that. So, and they would be sympathetic to the terracotta application in that they are a cementitious looking material rather than a slick aluminum panel.
Well, I like how they depicted it. First of all, it's recessive.
Right.
Second of all, it's dark.
Right.
So it creates contrast.
Yep.
And it actually gives the rhythm or helps the rhythm to the facade be established.
Mhm.
So I just do like the fact that they didn't bring a sample with them tonight. But I think your language is fine.
Okay, so if we can amend the condition to include all exterior facade materials if there's a change
Yeah,
from the proposed terracotta and fiber cement.
you want me to just not be specific to those two?
that's fine.
Just, all facade materials?
That's fine.
And so you would strike the infeasibility, right? Because change is different than infeasible, right? So,
Correct,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Commissioners, anything further?
Is that too restrictive? If they make any changes to the facade, they have to come back before us. I think that would be too restrictive if that's what we're saying.
So all special permit applications for these types of uses require design review. So technically speaking, in general, you have to come back if you're making changes to the facade. Materials we're a little more silent on usually. So this is just about the material specifically, but in general, if they 5 months from now decided to change the facade, they would be coming back here anyway under the design review guidelines.
And we've had issues in the past on larger scale projects where materials were value engineered, substituted and value engineered to the detriment of the project and the optics within town. So I feel more comfortable.
You might want to explain what the term value engineering is. Because it has a real dark side to it.
Cheaper, shittier looking material.
Yes. That clarifies.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've discussed this one enough. Call this to a vote.
Need a motion.
Oh, sorry, we need a motion, correct. Do I have a motion for this one?
I'll move to approve this application,
Commissioner Chris, second.
consistent with all of the conditions that we just discussed,
And an effective date.
in an effective date of March 4th.
Call to vote. Dan Radman, I vote yes. Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
John Chris,
Yes.
John Engel.
Yes.
Mr. Knag, are you recused for this one?
Yes.
Yeah, you are.
I'm recused.
Yep. Mr. Swerdlow.
Yes.
Eric Knowles.
Yes.
And Megan Mensching
Yes.
and Bill Pratt.
Yes.
Okay. This one passes. Thank you.
Not here accepting of comments, but we're not gonna cheat on materials because we want this thing to last 50 years with no maintenance.
Good. That's what we want to hear.
It'll look great.
It will. Congratulations.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
All right, Sarah. Administrative actions, anything?
I don't have anything for this month unless we want to.
Nope.
Update on the zoning reg committee or?
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay.
I saw the RFP draft.
So the subcommittee met last week. They all agreed on some goals, for the RFP for, sending it out to get, proposals back for a consultant. Hopefully, I'm sending out the RFP about 2 weeks from now, so we will hopefully have proposals back in late March, early April. So we're still probably 2 months out, probably 2 months out from really being ready to go, but we are on track.
Commissioner Engel, were you, I know you weren't able to attend last week's meeting, but are you still interested in being on the zoning regulation subcommittee? You are?
Yes.
Okay. Are you okay being an alternate for the committee, just so we have 5 regular voting members, and then you could sit, obviously, you're welcome to be part of the committee, but if there's someone that's not able to attend, you could the vote if it needs to be.
Wherever you need me.
Thank you. Okay, we also have meeting minutes from the January 23rd site visit, the January 23rd special meeting, as well as the January 28th regular meeting. Does anyone have any changes, comments, issues with any of the minutes?
I move to approve all the minutes. Sarah, I did send you some minor
I saw the 2
spelling.
typos.
Yeah,
We'll fix
minor
those.
typos on the January 28th, but nothing substantive changed, so I move to approve all 3.
Okay,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Great,
Good work.
we're done for tonight. Thank you very much,
We
commissioners.
have another 3 hours. What are you talking about?
Let's start again.
What's going on?
Let's go sit in on the finance committee.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Good luck with that.
It was no Brookwood, that saves some.
All right,
time.
so meeting adjourned, stopping.
Meeting
recording.
adjourned.